This is a review I didn't want to write. In fact, I tried and failed about half a dozen times, gave up, and made a post on YouTube saying that I was going to sit this one out because I felt like I couldn't write a video I was happy with. After all, Japanese Drift Master is a game made for me. I love Japan, I love drifting, and I love masturbating. Seriously though, this is the type of game idea I dream about, and I've now spent over 15 hours in JDM, have beaten the whole career, and set a world record on every single drift and grip track in the game, so why am I struggling to like it? Let's get to the handling and strap in because we're entering the opinion zone. I don't like the handling. I think the drifting can be alright, especially towards the end game when you can play around with custom setups, but the locked cars and early builds that you'll use throughout the career feel pretty bad. In my opinion, the drifting has been made far too simple and too much control has been taken away from the player, making the drifting feel unrewarding. It feels like you're suggesting what to do, but the game is the one in control. Even on Simcade handling, which is where I spent almost all my time, JDM heavily auto countersteers for you. Tire grip and vehicle momentum don't really feel very realistic, and that's probably my biggest issue, and it's almost impossible to actually spin the car unless you're really trying. This is a game where you aren't really learning how to drift, you're figuring out how the game allows you to drift. And some people are gonna like that. In fact, I know many people do. If you look at reviews from other creators or the discussions surrounding the demo and prologue, across the board, most people love the drifting. So statistically, you probably will too. I mean, it's easy to put the car sideways and you don't have to think about it much. For me though, it never felt like I was the one in the driver's seat, and even with custom setups on Simcade handling and a very nice Simagic wheel, the grip levels were just never right and the whole experience felt very padded, I guess. It felt like I was on rails and the rails weren't going where I wanted them to go. Especially early on, you're forced to do all these awkward, I hesitate to even call them manjis, but back and forth wiggles and corrections to set up for the next corner. There just isn't a good flow. You can't take a fast, realistic line, and that's what I want to do. I want to be able to link corners in one smooth transition and use the skills and tools at my disposal to drift the way I want to drift. And even later in the game, when you are able to build some cars that, in my opinion, actually do feel pretty good, it feels like the game doesn't want you to drift that way. Let's talk about the scoring, because even though at the end game I was able to build cars that felt pretty okay to me, the game doesn't reward that. I was absolutely able to get good enough scores throughout the whole game by driving more or less the way I wanted to, but I was also able to get much higher scores or even just comparable scores by driving much worse. I mentioned that I set world records on every single drift track, and that wasn't by drifting the way I wanted to drift. Instead, I got much higher scores by ignoring proper lines completely, going way too deep into every drift, and in many cases going off track completely so that I could keep the angle and drift going for longer. This isn't fun, but it got me top scores. On top of that, these drifting challenges are timed and there's no track limit, so it actually hurts you to drift fast and follow a proper line, because if there's time left over at the end of the run, that's time wasted. So for a hot tip, what you should actually do is complete your run, but don't cross the finish line, and instead just do donuts to run out the clock, and then cross the finish line as late as you can. That's how you get a high score in JDM. You aren't rewarded for hitting outside or inside clipping zones, you aren't rewarded for good transitions, you aren't even rewarded for staying on the track. For some constructive improvements, I think that the scoring could be massively improved in a few ways. One, have penalties for going off track. Dirt dropping on an entry is obviously fine, but just sliding around in the grass or ignoring the track completely and doing donuts in the parking lot should not raise your score. 2, reward speed more. There is a bonus for drifting fast, and I think the score goes up a little bit faster too, but it's not enough to offset the bonus you get from driving really slow with really deep angles. Time limits should be shorter on the challenge mode so you don't have time to just do donuts for a full minute before ending your run, and the bonus for going faster should be higher. Ultimately, like I've been saying, towards the middle to end of the game when the upgrades and tuning really open up, I was able to make cars that I enjoyed enjoyed more. But the AI and scoring system felt like it was almost pushing me away from that instead of rewarding me for it. While I do have some core issues with the physics themselves, I really think the crux of the problem for me is just how the scoring works. Because if enjoyable drifting was worth more points, I think I'd have more fun. Now, just for a real quick comment on the grip racing, because that is another element of the game, the grip driving is bad. It's really understeery and just not fun at all. Unlike the drifting, I don't think this one's gonna be a very hot take. The grip driving is just not fun. The collision physics are also currently super basic. There's no damage model or anything, you just bounce off whatever you hit, which kinda sucks for drifting because it makes it really hard to wall tap without bouncing and ruining the drift. They have said they're making some changes to collisions though in the future. Alright, so now that we've talked physics and handling and everyone's typed skill issue in the comments, let's move on to talk about the overall gameplay and career. The whole campaign plays out as a manga that you get in small chunks. You often get a story lead in to a mission, then do the mission, and then get a story payout. I really like this as a concept. For an indie studio, it's a good, probably lower budget, but unique and still high quality way of telling an interesting story with interesting characters without having to do voice acting and cutscenes. I beat the story, at least as it stands now, in just under 10 hours, and that felt like a perfect length. There were never any low points that felt drawn out for the sake of extending playtime, but it also never felt rushed. I had fun with the story, but be aware that it is very fan servicey. It's quite obviously inspired by Initial D and anime and racing culture in general. Like, it's handsome foreigner moves to Japan and all the babes with big boobs love him and the big muscly men hate him, but he's strong too and he beats up the mean muscly men and gets the girl with the biggest boobs because he's the best racer. It's just pure car guy weeb fantasy, and I don't really think you should take it too seriously. I mean, there are some adult moments and some heavy topics that come up with a pretty good payoff and ending, but overall it's super campy, and I think if you just accept that it's kind of self-aware of that, it becomes way more fun. You can also replay most of the missions at any time and have a menu where you can read the full story up to what you have unlocked, and I think that's great. I actually went back and essentially read through the whole thing from start to finish once I beat the game, and I loved that I was able to do that. As far as the career gameplay goes, it was fairly basic. You know, almost every mission involves you drifting, just under a different premise. You're either drifting to impress a girl, or drifting to beat your rival, or drifting to deliver sushi, but like, the game is called Japanese Drift Master, what do you expect? Even though I think it could have been nice to see a bit more gameplay variety, really, if I just liked the drifting more, I don't think I would have had any issue with it. It was mostly a case of, oh, I gotta drift someone else's car now and I don't like this setup, so I guess this mission won't be as fun. But other players who like the drifting might not have that issue, and even so, it was a minor thing anyway. Okay, it's time to talk about the map. I think the roads are great and the map size is solid, especially when you consider that there are also a handful of strangely familiar racetracks outside of the open world. The city feels like a completely different space far away from the quiet lakeside towns, and being up in the mountains and seeing the skyline down below, I mean, that's just always cool. The map is very striking. There's so much to look at, there's a ton of detail, it's very over the top, I guess I would say, and kind of leans into that same fan servicey vibe. Like, to be honest, almost none of this actually looks like Japan. It looks like a theme park where the theme is Japan, and that's fine. Like with the story, you just gotta own the fact that it's over the top and soaked in every Japanese reference possible, and that's fun in its own way. The game looks pretty good too. The lighting and post-processing are great. Again, there's tons of detail, and it does run pretty well. I also have to mention that I wanted to test this on Steam Deck too, but it forced a vertical 10:16 aspect ratio instead of the correct 16:10. So hopefully that'll get fixed soon too, maybe even by launch. The game also does sound pretty nice. Again, we're going back to that kind of over-the-top design choice, where cars have crazy backfire and pops and bangs and rev like mad, and that's all great. Each car sounds unique and at least generally close to how they sound in real life. Performance upgrades do change car audio, which is awesome. And overall, it's just nice and punchy in all different areas of the car audio. So that's definitely a high point. The music is another area right in line with the vibe of the rest rest of the game. And you actually have a bunch of different radio stations to pick from, which I was really happy to see. I can just throw on the Eurobeat or Synthwave or J-Music stations and be perfectly content. All the stations had great music. Alright, now let's kind of wrap up the big topics with cars and customization. JDM does have a pretty small car list currently. It's just under 30 vehicles, but almost all of those are licensed cars, and that's huge for me. They did not need to do that, but I'm so glad they did. I get the logic behind it, but it's always been a pet peeve of mine when the car that's obviously a Nissan 240SX is actually a Nippon 450ZZ or whatever. So seriously, props to the dev team for going out of their way to try and actually license as many cars as possible. For a small indie studio, that's a big deal, and I appreciate it. It may be a smaller list, but you're gonna find stuff you'll like and be able to customize it quite a bit. I've seen wide bodies for every car I've driven so far, on top of some good individual bumper selection as well. There's tons of good wings you can pick between. There are a lot of custom exhausts, including some big Kaido Racer style stuff. The tuning does have a visual effect, so you can adjust camber visually, but sadly don't have any wheel spacing or tire spec choices, so you can't really fine-tune fitment like you can in some other games, but you do get interior customization, which is nice to see. The underglow system is pretty good, and there are a lot of good wheels to pick from. The paint system was pretty basic. They're planning on adding a livery editor at some point, but for now, it's just full car color. So overall, there are certainly some areas where I want to see more customization, but you still have a lot to play with. So Japanese Drift Master, at least as I've played it right now, is definitely still a work in progress. If you like the handling and don't take the game too seriously, there is a lot to enjoy here, even if it's pretty rough around the edges. This is a game about drifting though, and unfortunately for me, I didn't find the drifting to be very fun. While the map is good, the cars and customization are good, and the story was fun, there just wasn't too much that was unique or enjoyable enough to keep me invested. This is gonna sound like a dig, and it's really not, but JDM feels like the Fortnite of drifting games. It's not realistic, and it's not trying to be. It's very over the top and colorful and kinda silly. It heavily leans into pop culture and references to other media, and you either like that or you don't. I think a lot of people are gonna really enjoy this game. Most of the other YouTubers I've watched already are, and I love that. I didn't even want to make this review because I don't like being negative, especially when it's a small, clearly passionate indie dev team and other people are clearly having fun with it. I want to let them have that fun. But like many of you correctly pointed out in my post, it's still important to be honest and share my thoughts, even when it's not easy or fun to do so. So there's my review of Japanese Drift Master. I truly hope the game does well. The studio clearly cares about it, and I will keep an eye on things to see how it improves over time. I think a lot of folks are gonna have fun with this one. I just didn't. So thanks everyone for watching. Of course, let me know what you think about the game, and I'll see you in the next video.